Is this the dagger?
It's been a while, but we are back. Welcome to another episode of the On the Ball podcast here on the PWSN YouTube channel. I'm your host, Pranav Sriram, joined by my co-host, Will Lachlan and Tipton. Guys, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing great. It's been, a couple weeks, but we're ready. The NBA is back in full swing. Well, kind of. I mean, COVID has obviously hurt. Some of the games have been delayed, which sucks, but there's so much to talk about. I mean, I tweeted it out, but there's literally never a dull moment in the NBA. I feel like off season, regular season, postseason, it doesn't matter. So I'm ready to go,
Thomas, how about you?
Yeah, I'm super excited. Obviously, like he said, never a dull moment in the NBA, and they never go more than about 2 days without being unnecessarily dramatic. So I'm excited.
Before we get into this week's dramatic events, make sure you go subscribe to our YouTube channel, download our mobile app. It's the best way to access all of our content. But with that being said, let's get into the dramatic events. So the Rockets traded James Harden after all the speculation of the offseason. They finally got a deal done once Harden announced his displeasure with the organization after the game against the Lakers. He wanted out. They traded him to Brooklyn. The full trade details are the Rockets received Dante Exum, Victor Oladipo, three first-round picks from Brooklyn, one Milwaukee first-round pick, and they get 4 pick swaps. And the Cavs get Jared Allen, and Pacers get Karis LeVert. It's a massive deal. So I'm going to start off with Thomas on this one. What are your takeaways from this? Who do you think won this deal? What do you expect from Brooklyn?
So I don't think there's necessarily a true winner to this deal. I really think that every team came out of this well. Like, I thought the Pacers, the Cavs, the Nets, the Rockets, I thought every team, like, if I had to grade, I'd probably give all of them at least an A-. Like, I thought for the most part they all did a really good job. For the Nets, it's like, you have to do this. When you have a chance to get James Harden, I'm sorry, but you don't pass up on it. You take those potential chemistry issues. Like you deal with that. You deal with fit issues. But when you have a chance to pair Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving together, I'm sorry, but you just can't say no to that. You can't. That's why I wanted Philly to trade to get James Harden. You can't pass up on a chance to pair Harden with Embiid. And I feel like that's the same thing with the Nets. Like, you have to take this risk. You have to pair these guys together. Yeah, I mean, it could end up being, not great. It could, the lack of defense, the lack of rim protection. There are concerns. This is not a completely safe move. With that being said, you absolutely have to do this. And I really like what they did. I didn't think they gave up a lot. Don't get me wrong, they gave up a lot, but I think for James Harden, pairing him with those guys, we'll have to see if it's worth it, but for now, they just had to take that risk. For the Rockets, I mean, this is a good haul. I mean, they're basically forming, like, the washed super team with, like, Wall, Cousins, and Oladipo. They got a ton of picks, and then they got some scrubs that I don't care about. But I didn't hate what they did. I mean, eight picks, essentially. I mean, you get to swap your picks. I don't know, what kind of value these picks are going to hold, but considering that they traded all of them away to OKC, they just kind of needed to replenish. And I felt like that this deal did that. For the Pacers, I like LeVert. Oladipo clearly wasn't going to stay. He clearly was not happy in Indiana for whatever reason. And I feel like getting a guy like LeVert, a promising young 2-guard who could score in a variety of ways, I feel like that's a solid move. I don't expect anything spectacular from him, but I do like his potential, and I think that in Indiana he can be a solid starting 2-guard for them. And the Cavaliers, they did good. I'm a big Jared Allen fan personally. I like what he brings. I like his rim protection. I like his is high intensity, always plays with a purpose. I just like Jared Allen as a player. Don't think he'll ever be great. I think part of the reason the Nets gave him up is because they didn't want to feel forced to pay him like, $10, $15 million. And even me as a huge Jared Allen fan, I wouldn't pay him that. They gave up Exum and a Bucks pick, but like getting Jared Allen, hopefully they get rid of Andre Drummond so Allen can get his minutes that he deserves. Because honestly, Allen's better than Drummond. I don't know how much of a hot take that is, but I'll take Allen over Drummond. But yeah, I like what every team did. I didn't feel like there was any team that truly lost. I feel like the Rockets, maybe you could say if those picks don't work out that they were the losers, but I really like what every team did here.
Will.
Yeah, in my opinion, I kind of agree. I think every team won, I suppose, in their own right. And it's honestly kind of a rare instance in that, there's a 4-team deal and all teams, you can't really pinpoint a clear winner and a clear loser. Now, that is to say, if it's, a couple of years down the line, we could easily come back to this and be like, all right, the Nets won a championship. They won the deal, obviously. You won an NBA championship. That's the ultimate goal. But if they lose and James Harden declines his player option in 2 years and he leaves, then this could be an absolute failure for the Nets because you have no picks and the super team, the big three, didn't end up working. But for now, it's kind of somewhere in the middle for the Nets. I honestly think that there's, definitely a likely possibility that all these teams can come out as winners. Well, so I'll start just with the Cavs and the Pacers. I honestly think they pretty much got steals, especially the Cavs. I mean, to get Jared Allen for a pick that wasn't even theirs, it was Milwaukee's pick, which is, we know Milwaukee's going to be great. So that's like a back end first round pick. That doesn't even really matter. And they're not even giving up their own pick. So to get Jared Allen, a guy who, I will say this, the Cavs center rotation right now looks very crowded, but long-term, Jared Allen's still great, especially for giving up a pick that wasn't theirs. Short-term, it's kind of iffy, but long-term, that's great. And then the Pacers, the Pacers, basically, they get rid of a guy who didn't really want to be there in Victor Oladipo and who's injury prone and he's older, and they replace him with a guy who plays the same position, but he's younger and he honestly probably has more scoring upside than Victor Oladipo. So you're basically replacing a disgruntled star player with a young piece. So I think that's pretty good for them. So I would say they probably get like A minuses, maybe even A's, depending on how great Karis LeVert ends up being and Jared Allen for those respective teams. For the Rockets, I think the deal was really, really good. I mean, we can't really come to a definitive statement until we see what those picks end up being. I mean, some of those picks are going to be like middle school players at this current moment. So we really honestly don't know until they actually use those picks. But I think the haul was excellent. I do think it could have been a little bit better. I don't understand why the Rockets couldn't have gotten Karis LeVert in the deal. If I was the Rockets, I would have rather wanted Karis LeVert just because you're trying to rebuild. And I mean, I don't know. Victor Oladipo is cool. I mean, like he'll be a good player for them right now. And I mean, it's a cool fit with John Wall and Boogie Cousins. And honestly, that's a decent team. I mean, they'll be a competitive team. They probably won't make the playoffs just considering it's the West, but it's a competitive team. But I don't see what was stopping them from also adding Karis LeVert to what they got. So I don't really understand why they couldn't get him or even Jared Allen in addition to what they got. And then for the Nets, I mean, obviously this is like the definition of go big or go home. Like this is literally, to me, this is the best offensive trio in NBA history specifically when it comes to just scoring the basketball. Like these are the three, I mean, just individually, these scorers are all like all-time great in terms of their just skill, especially when it comes to scoring the basketball. There are questions about the fit and the chemistry, and our next topic is obviously going to be, can they win a championship? We'll see. But I mean, and my last thought really is we thought the Clippers gave up their future. I mean, the Nets have basically given up their future for a second time. We saw it against the Celtics. It didn't work out. It was a complete failure. Obviously, what they're getting back is not anything like they got a wash KD and Paul Pierce, and they were second round exits. I don't think that's going to happen this time because James Harden is still a superstar level basketball player. And you're adding it to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So I'm expecting this team to be very good and be title contenders. But if it doesn't work out, then the Nets have basically just given up their future for a second time.
Before Pranav says anything, the thing with the Victor Oladipo thing is like he's just gonna leave. Like there's just like I get it for one reason, but like if they had a chance to get Karis LeVert and chose Oladipo over him, Now, I think salary-wise, maybe they would have taken it that way in order for it to contractually work. But if they actually chose Oladipo over LeVert, like that's just stupid. You can argue.
I don't get that.
If you want to say Oladipo is better than LeVert right now, yeah, that's fine, obviously. But like Oladipo's just going to leave. He has no incentive to stay.
Thomas, Chris Haynes actually reported yesterday that the Rockets are looking to flip Oladipo to Miami for additional assets.
Okay.
Well,
that makes sense.
If they could possibly get a first for Oladipo, I mean, I think that's what his value is, a mid.
Yeah.
I think that's good value.
For sure.
Yeah, if they can get another pick out of that, then that's good. But I mean, as it stands, Karis LeVert probably would have been a better asset. But if they're going to flip Oladipo, then that makes sense.
Right, because they acquired the Milwaukee pick instead of keeping Allen. So maybe their gear or their intention is to go towards picks rather than acquiring just players.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Nets, I'm not sure they're going to win a championship. I wouldn't put my money on it, but they had to do this. Chances like these don't come around often. I don't think people get that. Yes, this is something we've never seen in our lifetime, where a team that has such poor defensive efficiency has won a championship. Maybe they don't win a championship, but they have to try. The team before was not going to win a championship. The team with Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, it's a nice team. It will make the finals, but it's not going to push the Lakers. This team can. I wouldn't bet my money on it. Like I said, they have 3 superstars who could all score the hell out of the ball. All of them are top 10 scorers in the NBA, and you can't double team any one of them. It's going to create maximum floor spacing for each one of those guys to create. And I know there's situations where people are complaining about, oh, well, Kyrie and Harden, that's 2 ball dominant players. Well, yes, you're right. They are ball dominant players, but they could also compromise and play off the ball. And although they aren't great off ball players, like they're not good at cutting or like moving around screens, they could play off the ball in a sense where you can't double team any of them. So they're going to get open shots at the maximum. And that's why I think they had to do this. Chances like this to build a team with this much star power does not come around often. You can't just settle for a future. That's the problem with the Boston Celtics. In 2018, the Boston Celtics had a chance to go get Kawhi Leonard for like Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, and a first-round pick, and they rejected it because they could not they did not commit towards a championship team or a rebuild. They were in the middle. Danny Ainge did not want to commit to either or, and that's why they did not result in even a finals appearance that year. So the Brooklyn Nets made the right move. Chances like these don't come around often, like I've said multiple times, and they made the right move in terms of their championship picture. But in terms of the Cavs committed a highway robbery. I mean, giving up a first that wasn't even there to begin with for Jared Allen, whose value is a first-round pick, I think that's a massive steal. They can move on from Andre Drummond, flip him to a stupid contender that's going to pick him up. Maybe the Celtics want him. I don't know. But they could flip Drummond's contract. They shouldn't just keep him at all. They could flip Kevin Love. And that's a solid young 3. It's not going to be a championship young 3 at all. But it doesn't have to be. People gear young cores as if they have to be championship young cores. And can they just be competitive at first? I mean, build around Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Isaac Okoro, Kevin Porter Jr. Yeah, I know Thomas doesn't like Isaac Okoro. I mean, he's a part of the young core. And now you have Jarrett Allen. You have a well-balanced offensive machine along with defense in Okoro and Allen. And I think they could be a playoff team in a couple of years. Who knows? But I really like what the Cavs did in this deal. If there was one definitive winner, like Will said, there isn't a clear winner. But if there's a team that just automatically won, like no questions asked, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers by far.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I think the Nets probably they have the highest ceiling, obviously, as winners, but the Cavs probably have the lowest floor in that. Like, if the Nets end up being a disaster and the Rockets don't draft very well with those picks, then yeah, we could look back and say, hey, the Cavs won the deal just because they got Jared Allen, and the Cavs are now
no risk. It's a no risk,
right, exactly.
reward move.
Yeah, it's pretty high reward. And I do want to add one more thing about Harden. You mentioned Harden and like Kyrie and the fit, and I just kind of want to say, like, Harden was with last year with an extremely ball dominant point guard, and I understand they have Kevin Durant as well, but Kevin Durant can be a very efficient off ball player, so I don't really have concerns about that. Like James Harden averaged 35 points a game last year, basically, with another ball dominant point guard in Russell Westbrook. So I'm not too worried. You can't tell me that it's just 100% that this team is just going to be a disaster because Kyrie and James Harden are just not going to fit well because they're both ball dominant. I mean, we've seen James Harden get to the conference finals and almost beat the Warriors with another ball dominant point guard and Chris Paul. So it's like, I think it can work well.
But I get what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And I understand they have Kevin Durant, but I'm still just saying when it comes to just Harden and Kyrie, as long as Kyrie plays, and we'll get to that as well, but hopefully Kyrie can actually play games for them.
Before Thomas pitches in, I mean, I think people are forgetting that James Harden's a top 3 offensive player in the NBA. He's such a good creator with the basketball. He makes everyone better on the court. He finds open looks, open pass. He could read the passing lanes better than most players in the NBA. I mean, along with he's scoring, he's one of the best playmakers possibly of all time. He's an all-time great playmaker on the ball. So, I mean, that's going to be huge for this Brooklyn Nets team. He could read the passing lanes. I think him alone will make people know what to do, like cut to the basket or pull out for the open 3. I mean, he's just phenomenal. He's just phenomenal.
And I think what people are kind of forgetting about this, about having 3 superstars, is that now you have offensively flexible lineups. And when I say that, I mean that, like, yeah, the defense is automatically going to be a question mark with these guys. But that's okay. If you have Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, you're going to be able to run more defensive-oriented lineups where you're putting role players in who can play defense. Someone like Bruce Brown, who's been playing well for them. Jeff Green's a solid defender. Like, you have – now, obviously, those guys aren't stars. Those guys aren't going to play huge roles for this team. But when you have Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, 3 top 10 arguably offensive players in the game right now, you can have these kind of flexible lineups where you could have, like, let's say you have, Kevin Durant, and then you'll have Jeff Green as a front court partner, and you can have Kyrie and Bruce Brown or James Harden and Bruce Brown. Like, you can have these flexible lineups. And the small ball, like, imagine Kevin Durant at center, and you can just have like an ultra small ball lineup. Like, they have a bunch of lineups and flexibility with their roster that they can have right now. And I think as if they continue to add veteran role players that can defend and contribute, I think that the lineups that they can make are going to be really hard to stop.
So I'm going to pose one more question to the both of you, and that is, so like you said, if they keep adding role players or depth, don't forget, they have the $5.7 million disabled player exception due to the Dinwiddie injury. If you're to pick between 2 big men, because that's obviously their priority, they don't have any other priorities besides getting interior defense. Would you pick between Richaun Holmes of the Sacramento Kings or Nerlens Noel of the New York Knicks for interior defense? Will, I'm going to start with you. It's tough. Those are not like star players.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they'll be the backup to DeAndre Jordan. I mean, there's no way DeAndre Jordan is not going to be starting. He's best friends with these people.
To be honest, I'd start either of them over Jordan.
Yeah, I probably would too, but the Nets aren't going to do
Kevin Durant and Kyrie
love DeAndre Jordan. They're like best friends with him for some reason.
Jordan started over Allen.
Yeah, he was starting over Jared Allen. It's just, I mean, they could have like Joel Embiid on their team. They'd probably still start DeAndre Jordan. It's ridiculous. But in terms of which player, I maybe would lean Holmes. But I mean, honestly, you can get either one. I don't really care, to be honest. And they'll both, I think they'll play a pretty good role for either, being backup big to DeAndre Jordan. Hopefully they can come in. It's going to be because in the playoff series, if they're playing Embiid or Giannis, let's be honest, Holmes or Noel's not going to really do anything, but just be there. Like, they'll just put a body on either of those guys, so at least you'll have somebody who's not like old as heck, like DeAndre Jordan.
DeAndre Jordan.
Right, exactly. It's going to be rough, but I would definitely use that exception, obviously, to get someone, because you never know, it could end up being good. And then I do want to add one more thing. When it comes to just, people have said, well, Giannis and Embiid can go off against the Nets. And I agree. I mean, they can. But if you're telling me that a team in the East can realistically outscore this Brooklyn Nets team right now as they're currently constructed, I just don't see that in a playoff series, 4 out of 7 games. It's just, to me, it's just too tough. I just don't think Giannis or Embiid could do that by themselves without their role players and star players going off.
I think the Bucks stand a fighting chance, but we'll get to Philadelphia later. We will get to Philly.
Going back to Pranav's question, I'm taking Richaun Holmes, and I don't really think it's that close.
Hey, shout out our guy Nerlens though. He was
Yeah.
great for OKC.
Nerlens, I love Nerlens. Nerlens was a great contributor for us last year, but I think Holmes is actually like low key really good. Like he's not a star, but 13.5 points per game, 7.8 rebounds per game, 73.2 true shooting percentage. Two things I really like about Holmes. Okay, well, obviously he's super efficient, but he's really good in the short roll game. Like if you have Kyrie and Richaun Holmes, what Holmes does really, really well, and he does this well with De'Aaron Fox, is that while Kyrie can drive to the basket, Holmes doesn't always roll straight to the basket. He has like an elbow jumper game. He has a strong floater game for a big man. I think that's going to be really important, and he can make free throws. That's the difference between him and like the big difference in my eyes between him and DeAndre Jordan, is that Jordan is just a bad free throw, just a notoriously bad free throw shooter. Richaun Holmes is going to be able to stay on the floor in late game scenarios because he's athletic, he's fast, he can switch onto quicker guards with some effectiveness, and he can hit free throws. He's currently shooting 82.8% from the free throw line. I think that's extremely important for big men nowadays, is that you need to be able to hit free throws because late in the game, that's going to matter. Like if you want to stay on the court, you got to be able to hit free throws at a high level, and he clearly does that. In fact, he's one of the leading guys on Sacramento right now in terms of free throw percentage. So I really like Richaun Holmes, so I would definitely pick him.
Yeah, I mean, with $5.7 million, your options are limited, but I think those are the best possible options when I was scrolling through salaries the other day. I mean, there's a bunch of guards in there. Like, I'm not sure how much do you want Lou Williams on the?
No, absolutely not.
No, stop.
You want
defense.
Who wants Lou Williams after last year's playoffs?
No, I mean, the Clippers want to get rid of him.
Yeah, and that's like the opposite. Like that's like the least player you.
That's just even more offense.
You want defense, like that. If you're going for a role, if you're going for a strong role player, they got to be defensive minded at this point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've never seen. We've never seen a team that is, how do I say this offensively potent, but also this defensively bad. I mean, we're yet to see how they're put as a unit. I think people don't realize that they're going to definitely stagger the minutes between Harden and Kyrie. Like people think they're all three of them.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Oh, there's only one basketball. Like you see the memes on Twitter, which is like, oh, this is not. There's only one basketball, 3 ball hogs. I mean, like no, it's going to be staggered minutes. One of them is going to be on the court at all times, which is important. But I mean, no, it's not going to be as bad as people think it's going to be.
And also for like the ball hogs argument, like James Harden, he almost has to be a ball hog. Like last year with Houston, like, yeah, you had Russ, and that's when Harden's usage rate went down, when he was playing with another star. But when you don't have another star and you don't have another great creator, like who's handling the ball for you? Like, of course Harden's going to have the ball a ton. He's the best player on the team. He's the best creator. He's an all-time great creator, as we were just talking about. Why wouldn't he have the ball in his hands a ton? Kyrie, I mean, say what you want about the guy, but I do think he is portable. Like, I think you can, like, he's clearly shown that you can plug him into systems, and he's gonna, he's gonna be able to share the rock. And same thing with Kevin Durant. We've seen him, he plugged himself seamlessly into Golden State. It was able to take more of like a catch and shoot or like a catch and attack role. They're all still going to get their isolation possessions. That kind of stuff is still going to happen. But I really think that they can make this work offensively. I don't think the argument of, oh, they're all ball hogs. Oh, how are they going to be able to share it? I just think that can be refuted pretty easily.
My biggest concern with Kyrie Irving's overall play style is we all know how great of a scorer he is, but he doesn't provide any defensive value, and he also is not a great playmaker. Let's just be honest, he's not a great passer at all. I mean, his passing efficiency is in the lowest percentile. I mean, he's not a good passer, and that was my biggest concern. Are the Brooklyn Nets, their lack of creator? They don't lack a creator anymore. We all know essentially that Kyrie is a shooting guard playing point guard, and James Harden is a point guard playing shooting guard. So the creator concern has been acknowledged. Now I just think they need a serviceable big man who's not DeAndre Jordan.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, one last thing. to your point, Pranav, about the staggered minutes, and it's like when other teams, like other contenders, like the Bucks or like the Heat or like the Celtics, are playing their bench units, the Nets are still going to have a superstar level scorer on the floor, like at all times. You mentioned it, like Kyrie's just going to be on the floor and he's going to be able to just get buckets, and you're not going to be able to stop him, and that you're just like the Nets are going to be able to come from behind or keep a lead. It doesn't matter. I mean, they can play so many ways offensively, and so I definitely think that the fit can be overblown. But that's not to say that it might not work. But I don't even think it's necessarily going to be because they don't fit in from a scheme wise on the basketball court. I think it would mainly be a chemistry locker room issue, if anything.
When Kyrie is your third option to go to, that's a really nice luxury.
Yeah.
It's a really nice luxury to have. But Thomas, you were going to say something? Or?
Nope.
Okay, well, we're going to move on, and we're going to stay on the same note with Kyrie Irving. So Kyrie Irving, obviously we got the report earlier today that he was fined $50,000 for breaking COVID protocol, and $800,000 plus is going to be taken out of his paycheck. So moving forward, are you guys concerned about Kyrie, or do you think that now with Harden and Durant and the Nets having an actual chance at winning a championship, he'll stay committed the rest of the way?
I don't know how you can say yes or no to that, to be honest. Like Kyrie is just such a wild. Now I'm not going to go out here and bash Kyrie Irving. Like I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to look at this objectively. This is a guy who obviously no one's denying his skill on the basketball court. The reality is he hasn't been on the basketball court. He's been out doing. We don't really know. Yes, he was at his sister's birthday party. We saw him attending some kind of Manhattan council meeting or whatever that was. I really don't know the details. But that's the thing. We don't know the details. He's missing games for a non-injury related reason. He's not really communicating well with the team. No one really knows. So I don't see how you can definitively say one way or another, oh yeah, he's going to be fine. Or, oh, no, he's just, I'm not going to go say Stephen A. Smith, oh, he should retire, because that's just absolutely ridiculous. But this can go one of two ways. But I just don't think that you can definitively say that that this is going to go one way or another. I think Harden is a good luxury in case Kyrie is out long term. I think that in the time being, you have Harden and Durant, which is probably the best offensive duo in the league right now, purely offense. And so I think in the short term, that's going to be fine. But obviously, Kyrie's one of the stars of your team. You're going to need that. So I don't really know. It's just going to have to be one of those things where it's like, let's find out.
Right. Will.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree on the token that you said that he's impossible to project. So I can't really form too many strong opinions on Kyrie, definitive, rock solid opinions on Kyrie Irving. It's just kind of nah. But I will say this: there's a couple things that people don't really realize with Kyrie. Two things can be true with him. Number one, what he did in terms of partying without a mask, even though it was his sister's birthday. And I'm not opposed to seeing your sister on your birthday and celebrating, but I am opposed to attending a party without a mask and not taking any precautions when you're an NBA athlete during the middle of the season, where the coronavirus is still a very real thing and just as bad as it's ever been in the country right now, and just taking no precautions whatsoever. I think that's a mistake on his part. Now, number two, I don't think that makes him a bad person or just a bad player, as some people do. Some people will just use that to disparage him. I mean, he's a great person. I mean, and I don't think that changes this. And I will say this: I do respect Kyrie Irving for staying. I believe. I'm not really sure what that Zoom meeting was about. I think it was maybe COVID related, or maybe it was social justice related. I have no idea. Probably one or the other. But I will say this: I do respect Kyrie Irving at least for keeping his word and saying that he would basically devote anything to social justice, which includes his basketball career. And it's kind of seems like that's based on what he does, especially this season, that he's staying true to that. So I at least respect him for that. I mean, he's not going back on his word. In terms of what the Nets need to do at this point, they for now wait. But I mean, eventually he's got to come back, right? Because you need this trio to play if they're. I mean, they can't just show up in the playoffs and be like, all right, we're going to give it a try. They need to play regular season games. We saw what happened last year with the Clippers, who developed no chemistry whatsoever. Partly due to the break and due to injuries, but still, they didn't take advantage when they should have to build chemistry. So hopefully the Nets don't fall into the same trap. And if they do, then Kyrie Irving could be a reason why.
I just don't know. I don't see how you can definitively form an opinion because we don't know. We just don't know what he's doing. Like if he's just sitting on his couch, and he's attending some of these things, and he's not really doing anything. Yeah, we can judge him, but we don't. How can we know? We're not in Kyrie Irving's body. We don't see what he's doing behind the scenes, and that's kind of the problem here. He's not communicating. We don't know what he's doing. So I don't think anyone should. Well, yes, I am not a fan of just missing basketball games for non-injury and non-COVID related reasons. I'm not a fan of that. But with that being said, we still don't know what's happening. Like if he's like working for social justice behind the scenes, I can at least respect that. I can. But if he's just like not really doing anything, we just don't know. Like I just don't see how people can form a definitive opinion without truly knowing.
Well, thankfully, on Twitter, World Wide Wobe had an investigation, and he figured out that he was attending. He figured out the truth, so at least we got that. Otherwise, we'd be sitting up here and judging Kyrie for partying with Drake, according to NBA Reddit, which is just completely false, obviously.
So there's this massive like stat going around that like Kyrie has missed over like half of his games with the Nets, and I think that stat is kind of unfair because last year it was injury-related reasons. That's why he missed games. He didn't just sit out. He missed games due to injury. He had a shoulder surgery, which ended his season early. So, I mean, that stat is really misleading. I think people are taking that out of context, which they typically do when it comes to Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie Irving is the poster child in the NBA for slander. I've been on here defending him multiple times, but here's the thing with Kyrie. We don't know. Like Thomas has said, we don't know the full details, but the optics don't look good when you're partying maskless at a mass gathering with not only family, but several people in attendance. It's not a good look. I mean, I don't know what else he's doing. If he's doing something for social justice, which I'm guessing he's doing because he's heavily involved in that. I applaud him for that. I actually respect it a lot. I mean, great for him. But I mean, you can't miss work for that. I mean, how do I say this? You can't miss work for a birthday party. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, you can't risk your work's protocols because of a birthday party. I mean, if you're gonna attend, at least wear a mask. If you need to take a couple of days off, I completely understand that. If you need it for your mental health, I mean, if you're in a state of mind where you're like, hey, I need a couple of days off, I get that, but don't do something that's going to make that decision look questionable. That's what Kyrie did, which is why he's getting all the negative press that he is right now. He made the decision of taking a couple of days off look questionable by not wearing a mask at a large gathering, which is why people are slandering him. So, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into it other than that, but that's what I'm coming from. Kyrie put himself in that position where he didn't wear a mask at a mass gathering. But other than that, I'm not going to say much.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The only thing, like, I think we all don't judge Kyrie as much as, other people in the big media do, or even just like jealous LeBron fans or salty LeBron fans because they left, Kyrie left LeBron high and dry. Yeah, my point is with Kyrie, it's like we really can't judge him. Right, we don't know. And then also, like, I'm not going to disparage him I believe he cited that he was taking a mental health break, and I'm okay with that because it's obviously very important. And other, players like Kevin Love and DeRozan have come out and, posted articles on the Player Tribune about their stories. So it's obviously very, very important. So I'm not exactly against the why of what he was doing in the first place, but I am against what ended up happening, which is that he was that's making a complete careless mistake on your part by attending a party really in the first place. Even if you do wear a mask, it's still just not that good of an idea, in my opinion, especially given the times that we're in. And the fact that you're an NBA basketball player and that it is so important to be staying safe because, I mean, we saw literally with Rudy Gobert make one mistake and the entire league was ruined for months. And we had to go into a bubble. And we don't want that to have, obviously, the NBA to be on pause again for months and months again. So it's just not a good idea. in my opinion.
Keep in mind as well, like it's like mental health break. Like Kevin Porter Jr. hasn't. I don't think he's played a game for the Cavaliers. He is on a mental health break. We saw him post that suicidal thing. I don't know if it was on his story or on his feed, whatever. It doesn't matter. He's taking a mental health break. He's working on himself. That's fine. No one's slandering Kevin Porter Jr. No one's slandering Kevin Porter Jr. for that, because it's actually proven that that's what he's doing, or at least that's what we think he's doing. But with Kyrie, it's just like you're not communicating. We don't really know. So I just don't want him to get mad. I don't want him to be like all defensive and be like, oh, the media is hating me again, because like we just don't know. Like we don't I'm not saying he put this upon him, but we just don't know.
Yeah, I will say this one thing. I wish Kyrie, because sometimes Kyrie, I feel like he shouldn't have it coming, but sometimes he does, because it's just sometimes what people on the internet and the media can do is that they can just warp your words. So it just doesn't make sense to me why Kyrie hasn't quite learned that what I say and what I do is going to be interpreted bad. So I should just be more cautious in general. And it's like, I understand you do you, and I respect that, but it's just like, if you could be a little bit more cautious and avoid some of the, I feel like it could be some of this could be avoided.
Did you guys know that Robert Williams III of the Celtics had a party at his house with strippers? Did you guys know that?
No,
I did not know that.
You did not know that.
I don't really care about Robert Williams.
Yeah, exactly. We do not care about Robert Williams. However, people care about Kyrie Irving. You know why? Yeah. Because people care what he has to say. He is, I hate to say it like
this,
player. But he's more relevant. Let's put it like that. He's more relevant than Robert Williams III. Kids look up to Kyrie Irving. You know why? His play is inspirational, like Flight would say. He is an inspirational basketball player. So, I mean, Kyrie, he's going to get pressed because he's Kyrie Irving. He's a superstar. He's not Robert Williams III, where he could just go under the radar. Like, you guys didn't even know that Robert Williams had a party because he's Robert Williams III. No one cares.
The Time Lord.
Otto Porter Jr. did as well, too. I don't know if you guys knew that, but.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kyrie Irving's a superstar. Everything is going to get magnified when you're a superstar. So, that's just what comes with it. It's unfortunate that he's going to get more blame than people who've probably done worse things in terms of breaking protocol. But that's just the way it is if you're that good at what you do. And another thing to wrap up the segment is Kyrie. How do I even say this? Actually, I lost my train of thought just there. But yeah, basically that's going to wrap up the entire Kyrie segment. We're going to move on to the Philadelphia 76ers. So obviously they did not trade for James Harden. Stupidly, they did not trade for James Harden, and at least in my opinion. What are your guys' thoughts? Are they the biggest losers? And do you think they're an actual threat in the Eastern Conference if they didn't make this move? Because they started off really hot to start off the season. Do you guys think they're legit, or do you think, nope, they needed to pull the trigger? Absolutely, they're complete losers.
Well, they absolutely needed to pull the trigger. Like, I don't think any of us are going to sit here and deny. They absolutely needed to do that, right. And they missed. And from what I heard, it was they only asked for Ben Simmons, Thibault, and picks. And I was seeing so many people say, oh my goodness, I never want to do this trade if it includes Maxey. I'm not even going to get into that. But I just, like, the 76ers, like, they're just not doing it for me. They're just not. As great as Embiid is, like, don't get me wrong, but imagine Embiid with Harden. Because Embiid does get double teams in the post, and he has to pass it out to shooters. Now he has actual shooters that, that can work with. But now pair that with James Harden, one of the best creators of all time. Okay, the pick and rolls, first of all, they're just going to be insane. But also, you're going to have another shooter. When Simmons doesn't have the ball, you're essentially playing like 4-on-5 basketball offensively, because you're not passing to Simmons for an open three, because he's either just going to drive and stop and pass it to the corner, or he's just going to do nothing and just continue with the flow of the offense. So I just don't believe in the 76ers. As great as Joel Embiid has been, I think right now he's the MVP. Like, if the season ended today, I think he would win MVP. But I just with Ben Simmons, like, that's really the concern, because the shooting is there, their defense has been great, the coaching has been solid. The bench, they've had a couple of key contributors off the bench, Maxey, Isaiah Joe, but it's Simmons. that's what really just I want to say ruins this team. I know Simmons is a great player, but just again, just his lack of spacing and just like offensively, like he is just in the playoffs, he's a liability. So we'll have to see. But for now, I'm out on the Sixers.
So before Will goes, one of the most delusional fan bases in sports is obviously Philly fans. So one of my best friends is a Philly fan, and here's my text exchange between him when I was talking about the trade. Wow, it really might happen. Harden and Embiid. He said, "Holy expletive, but I don't want to give up Maxey. I expletive love him." This is the delusions, which is the reason why Philadelphia sports, other than that one Mickey Mouse year where they won a Super Bowl, this is why they don't get anything done. And this is why they're still high on Ben Simmons after 4 years. Ben Simmons, let me just get this straight. I want everyone to hear this. Benjamin Simmons is the reason why this team has done nothing. This team has done nothing because of this man. This man has done virtually nothing to improve his offensive game from year one. He stayed the exact same, 16 points per game with a measly 7 rebounds and 7 assists. That is very cute. That is like good not role player, but high-end starter level averages. He hasn't improved at all. His rookie year was really promising. We're like, oh, this is something that's going to be turned into a superstar. No, he's the exact same offensive player. He's not worked on his jump shot once. I mean, he's bricked during practice, but he doesn't even attempt during the games. He attempted once during the preseason. I mean, this man is just so offensively incompetent. I saw a play yesterday, which just made me turn off my TV. It was Ben Simmons driving towards the paint when Embiid was open right behind him, and he didn't know what to do. So he like dribbled and then he jumped out of bounds and he tried to do a Patrick Mahomes like hop step throw to the corner to Maxey. Like, bro, what are you doing? I mean, this is the reason why Philadelphia's offense isn't elite. They could be great. Embiid can have maximum floor spacing if Ben Simmons wasn't there. Ben Simmons is a team cancer. He's not a locker room cancer. He's a team cancer. He's infected this team. He infects this team's offense. He's a great defensive player. He's not a great offensive player. And he's the reason why the process has failed.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Again.
So honestly, yeah. Okay. I will
it's
say
always a great day for some Simmons slander.
Yeah. If the Sixers just completely fail this year, then I'm probably going to be right in with you, Pranav, in what you're saying. But just overall, to address the Philly and Harden, I completely agree. Harden, yes, they absolutely missed their perfect opportunity, and this was literally Philly's. Now I'm not going to say one chance, but this is a huge. This is the best opportunity they had of becoming legitimate contenders. Not only would you have gotten Harden, and the Nets wouldn't, so now you'd be competing against the Nets. There wouldn't be any, questions about Simmons developing anymore because you wouldn't have him anymore. You'd have a better player, a far better player in James Harden. And James Harden is a better fit with Embiid than Ben Simmons. I mean, Ben Simmons, sometimes it can be a little bit overblown about their fit. I mean, it's good enough to win some games. It's not like god awful, but it's not very good. And James Harden is a very good fit with Joel Embiid. And obviously, Joel Embiid and Embiid and Harden is just better on every level than Simmons and Embiid as a duo. And I get it. The depth would be a little shot. But if you're really telling me that Tyrese Maxey or Shake Milton is the reason, keeping one of those, if that's the reason you couldn't get James Harden, that is pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic. Those guys are never going to be anywhere close to the player that James Harden will be. It's just ridiculous. And I understand,
the Philly fans are like, oh, I love Maxey. I love him.
I get it. He just scored 40 points, but his trade stock, he scored 40 points. His trade stock has been as good as it's been ever. So, I mean, it just helped his trade stock, if anything. And I get it. You can build some pieces in the offseason to, because if they did make this trade, their depth would be pretty questionable. They'd have like Korkmaz is like maybe their 7th best player, which is not that great. But I still think they have a better chance of winning and succeeding in the playoffs with James Harden, obviously, even though, you don't have Ben Simmons, but you also really don't have very much depth. To me, it's just the Sixers, they could have been in a win now mode. I think the Sixers, they're kind of, it's even a worse version of this. Like the Celtics are in like are they in a win now or are they in like a future? It's like, what are they? The Sixers are even worse. They're even more down that rabbit hole of like, is this duo for the future or are they winning now? Who the heck knows? And to address your points about Ben Simmons, the thing is, Ben Simmons and the Sixers have had so many excuses. First, it was Brett Brown. And first, it was the pieces. And I think these are legitimate reasons to why the Sixers didn't succeed. I'm not saying these aren't legitimate, but you had Brett Brown. He's gone. You have Doc Rivers, who's a competent coach. He's a little overrated, but he is still a pretty solid coach. And he's a far improvement over Brett Brown. You have, Tobias Harris, who's playing his natural position. And he's also playing with the coach that coached him
playing well.
Yeah, he was a good, Tobias Harris was on the Clippers. He was the power forward, and Doc Rivers was his coach. And that was the season in which he was very efficient, and he was actually a pretty good player. Like he was an all-star. I mean, he was an all-star level player like that one regular season. He just didn't make it because he was in the West, obviously. And now Tobias Harris, you get Al Horford away. Seth Curry has been in there. Danny Green is in there. If the Sixers can't do anything in the postseason, I completely agree. Ben Simmons is the main reason why. And the Sixers have just been ignoring that issue because, of all the other mistakes that they've made. And those mistakes have been remedied, and there's really no excuse at this point.
And everyone is like, oh, well, what's going to happen when Ben Simmons gets a jump shot? It's what evidence are you?
Yeah.
Like, it's his fourth year in the NBA. He's taken like 2 threes this year. Okay? And he hasn't, I think Dwight Howard's his shooting coach at this point. Like, he just has no effort and he has no drive to work on his 3-point shot for whatever reason. Maybe it's a lack of confidence. I don't know what it is, but there really shouldn't be a reason. The fact that he really hasn't improved whatsoever offensively, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And I mean, to think that we called this man like a mini LeBron in his rookie year is just ridiculous. Like people were like, he's a mini LeBron. He can pass, he can play defense. He's just a 6'10" point guard.
He's an oversized Lonzo Ball.
No, he's 6'10". He's 6'10" Rondo.
Let me be.
He's a better version of Lonzo Ball, I guess.
He is Walmart Draymond Green who doesn't know that who thinks he's on LeBron's level. He's Walmart Draymond Green who thinks he's on LeBron's level. That's Ben Simmons.
I don't know why they put him on the All-NBA team last year, to be honest.
It was atrocious.
I mean, defensively, sure. Like he's probably one of the most versatile defenders in the league, but you have to give me some sort of offensive scoring production mainly because we know he can play make, but his playmaking can sometimes just be inhibited because he can't score the ball all that well. Like he gets 16 points, he can score inside, but that's because of his size and his athleticism, not because of skill.
Your value as a playmaker goes significantly down when you don't have high scoring gravity.
Yeah, and
it has the worst scoring gravity in the National Basketball Association.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Shoot a jump shot.
Yeah, and I would say it's vice versa when it comes to scoring and playmaking. If you can do both at a very great level or at a high level, then if you can score at a very high level and improve your playmaking, it'll just skyrocket your overall offensive game and vice versa for players. And Ben Simmons is just you cannot bet on it happening at all.
So do you guys think 2.6 points per game, 1.7 assists per game, and 0.8 rebounds per game, something like that, on 41.7 true shooting percentage is good? Do you guys think that's good?
Sounds like a scrub. That sounds like Isak Bonga's stat line.
Okay, that's atrocious. Well, Philadelphia did not want to include Maxey. I get it. He's a good young player. So the Rockets asked for Matisse Thybulle, who averages 2.7 points per game, 0.8 assists, and 1.7 rebounds on 41.7% true shooting. And then Daryl Morey, who I have a lot of respect for. Daryl Morey is one of the best general managers in basketball. He didn't pull the trigger. I don't know what he sees in Matisse Thybulle. Maybe he sees some defensive god. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the thought process was.
Since when is
report? I'm hoping that's not true. I'm praying that isn't
true. Since when has Daryl Morey ever cared or gave a damn about defense? Since when? Makes no sense. I mean, is he turning over a new leaf? Is he because he focused so heavily on offense? Is he now just focusing everything on defense?
It's opposite day.
Yeah,
you
it's
go.
opposite.
Because the 76ers have the best defensive rating in the NBA. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
I mean, defensively they're good, but it's just like the Sixers just don't seem to realize that you need to be able to score the freaking ball. Like
you
they
need a
have these great
combination of
defensive
both
teams
an
on
elite
paper. You need to
offense and an elite defense
have
to win
a
a
great offense to
He,
win a championship.
he kept Thibault for his vlog camera. That's my theory.
And I'm praying
Respect.
that those reports aren't true because I have too much respect for Daryl Morey to the point where
Yeah, I'm hoping it was.
I'm hoping he did not do that.
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of conflicting reports on whether it was because of the Sixers or the Rockets that the deal didn't happen.
Right.
I think the main report is that the Sixers were a little too stingy. It's not definitive, but if they were, then this is just a terrible look for them. And I mean, look, just because they got James Harden doesn't mean that they would have. I mean, I wouldn't take them, even if they got Harden, I wouldn't take them over the Lakers, obviously.
Right.
But at least you're putting yourself, I mean, James Harden still has several years of elite basketball in him. I mean, sure, he could drop maybe to like a fringe top 10 player with the emergence of Luka or even Nikola Jokic, but he's still going to be an elite superstar offensive player. And Ben Simmons just has shown no signs of getting anywhere close to that level, and he's just going to remain on this like all-star level player just because of his defense, frankly. And that's really the only reason he's going to make all-star games, and because he's in the East.
I hope people realize he's not top 25 in the league. Maybe not even top 30.
I think I had him. I don't know why.
Maybe is he even top 40? I mean, we could
Probably.
Sure,
we
because
can,
of
we can
defense.
argue a lot of levels with Ben Simmons.
I'm not going like I've seen NBA Instagram go to the level of Brogdon, and I'm just not. I'm not there yet.
So, as you guys know, the 76ers have the best defensive rating as of now. I mean, there's nothing to take too seriously with the small sample size. Here's the thing people don't realize. The Brooklyn Nets have an atrocious defense. The 76ers, if they got Harden, would have had an elite offense. I mean, they have a top 3 offensive player in the NBA, along with the top 5 defensive player in Joel Embiid. That's a perfect combination. That's literally what you want. That's literally the formula for winning a championship. Look at the Lakers. They have a top 3 offensive player in LeBron, and they have a top 5 defender in AD. It's literally common sense. That's how you build a championship team. I mean, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, and they would have fit great. And obviously your defense would have taken a hit because you did lose Ben Simmons, but it would have evened out. Like your defense would have still been pretty good, and your offense would have gone up dramatically.
Speaking of Ben
Be a lot
Simmons,
more balanced.
I mean, speaking of Ben Simmons, the defense improves with Ben Simmons off the court this year. I mean, it's nothing to take too seriously as it's a small sample size. But it shows that his impact can be overstated because you know why? He's a guard. It's more valuable for being a big man and a defender rather than a guard being a defender. And you just don't pass up on an offensive talent like James Harden, whose offensive value is so much higher than what Ben ever brings on defense.
Like, you're obviously going to get worse without Simmons, but if you still have a top 5 rim protector in Joel Embiid, I don't want to say that doesn't matter, but like you're basically sacrificing a great defensive player for an all-time historic offensive player who can play defense when he wants to. Like James Harden,
elite post defender.
You said you get worse without Simmons. I disagree. You don't get worse. You don't get worse when you trade away Simmons because he doesn't bring anything offensively. His defensive value is great, but the fact that he's so incompetent offensively is the reason why you don't your team does not suffer when you lose him. That's my take. I know you probably agree on that, but defensively you might suffer. But it's the offensive load you're getting back is really outweighs.
Yeah, it just completely trumps that.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to another topic here, which is we obviously know all of the COVID-19 what COVID-19's impact has been this season on the NBA. I think the Grizzlies Timberwolves game is the 13th postponement. Prayers up to Karl Anthony Towns as well. He tested positive for COVID-19. Been a rough year for him. Prayers up. But I mean, guys, do you think the NBA should postpone the season for 2 weeks at least, or maybe even longer to contain the spread of COVID-19? Will, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Possibly, but I think the NBA should do something that's. I don't even think delaying the season or postponing the season is like the best thing that they could do. The best thing that I think they could do is make better rules for this whole contact tracing nonsense, because their rules are just wildly inconsistent right now. It's like, I believe Tatum or Beal, one of the two, or I think Tatum was put on the contact tracing list because he like shook hands with Bradley Beal. And it's like they just have these weird rules for like you can't like talk to, but they're like, it just doesn't make any sense because you can't talk to the players after the game too much. You can't get too close, but you're playing and you're literally playing on a basketball court and guarding them on the basketball court while you're playing the game. It just makes no sense. So it's like these contact tracing rules are either way too strict or they're way too loose. They're just so inconsistent. So I think getting that under control would be the best thing, because I mean, obviously, if the player gets positive for coronavirus, they're obviously going to take like a 14-day break at quarantine. That's obvious. The whole contact tracing stuff is just so inconsistent, and they need to have concrete, actual rules in place and just enforce them well, or else this is just, I don't really see, even if a delay happens, the problem still might not go away. Because I mean, what's to say that, like, you know, the NBA takes like a month break? What's to say when it comes back that the NBA, if they haven't done anything, that, you know, the situation's improved? Obviously, maybe we'll be closer to a vaccine, but we still like we don't really know. That's just anyone's really guess until when all the players could obviously get that, because that's really just coming out and it's coming to like obviously essential workers first. So I think, you know, overall, I'd be fine if they delayed the season. I mean, obviously, it would suck we wouldn't be able to watch basketball, but in the grand scheme of things, who really cares? Because, I mean, obviously, you need to get that situation under control. And another solution I have would be to honestly play the playoffs in a bubble. I know for a full season, the bubble is not a very good idea just because of all the financial resources and just the sheer manpower it would take to do that for like a
Plus,
70 game season, and all the players not seeing their families. And it's just too much. But for a playoffs, I think it could work. And I think, especially like, imagine if we're in the NBA, if they don't do if they couldn't do a bubble, and like Anthony Davis gets positive for COVID in the middle of the playoffs, that would suck.
It's like what happened with the Cleveland Browns this past week with Kevin Stefanski.
Right, exactly.
I know Will does not want to.
We saw how that went.
I know,
but my point is, like, what a star player could get COVID, and then their team's chances is screwed if they're not in a bubble. And it's been just completely proven for a fact that a bubble works better. Now, that's not obviously to say that it should just be the automatic solution, because it's tough to make it happen. But I think for the playoffs, I think it's the best solution, because that's the only way that you can guarantee that all the players will be able to just be healthy and on the court consistently for all the series.
I just think you got to power through it. The NFL did it. They had a ton of cases. There were times where they had breakouts. They powered through it. Things got better. If things go south, if it really starts to get crazy, absolutely. Shut the season down for 2 weeks. But I think what they just have to do for the time being is just power through it. Like, essentially, I've heard a lot of people say, like, oh, the season's going to be ruined by COVID, and, you know, there's going to be a bunch of asterisks. But here's my problem with that.
Mouse.
Well, COVID is essentially an injury. Like, injuries happen every year. Like, you have guys that go down with injuries, but we don't put asterisks on those years because that's just how it is. I mean, I'm not saying COVID is your normal, you know, injury or normal reason you sit out, but in the sense that it's still something that happens that, you know, causes a player to miss time. It's like an injury in that sense. So I don't really understand that perspective of like, oh, it's going to be ruined. I'm just worried about the players' safety and just making sure that they, you know, there's not some massive COVID outbreak. But for now, my gut is telling me just power through it and see how it goes. If it goes south, yeah, shut it down 2 weeks, maybe even 3, and then start getting back rolling. But I would just say power through it until, you know, you can't.
So it's a hard situation. I'm gonna lean towards a similar line of what Thomas said. Power through it, but the magic number is gonna be 21 games for me. If you have 21 games that are postponed, I think that is when you've reached a peak, which is like, okay, this is too much. We have to put a stop to this, and then you postpone for 2 weeks and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. But we all knew this was going to happen. The reason why the NFL had more success was because they don't play games as frequently as the NBA. So, I mean, it's tough to see how they're going to reschedule all of this. I mean, maybe they just cancel those games for good because they don't have time. I mean, I don't know how they're going to do this, but in terms of mitigating, I'll I'll put a hold on that. I mean, you get to 21 games. If it gets to 21 games, you're at a stage which is like, okay, this is extremely bad. It's already getting bad. I mean, they're at almost 14 games right now. They're not far away.
Yeah, there's like 3 games tonight that aren't going to happen. They're postponed.
And the part which is the worst part about this is stars have to sit out. I mean, it's not just the role players; the superstars have to sit out. Like Karl Anthony Towns just today. I'm not sure we consider Russ a star anymore, but Will's favorite player.
He's my star.
Uh, Jason Tatum, just because he was in contact with Beal, even though everyone on the basketball court was in contact with Beal, has to sit out for 14 days. I mean, what if LeBron or Steph or one of these high grossing players who bring in so much revenue to the game sits out because of COVID? I mean, that's not going to be beneficial for the NBA, and they're just playing through games which they can have back if they just postpone it. So I don't know how they're going to go about this. It's obviously a really tough situation for everyone. But we'll see. I completely agree that they should have a playoff in the bubble. I'm not sure the NBA Players Association would be so willingly able to do that, but it's probably for the best that they do a playoff in the bubble.
Yeah, I think it would just be as good of a compromise as you could find. I understand from the player's perspective, but I mean, if you're like some teams will be out of there, could be out of there in like 4 games. Let's be honest. So it's not going to be too bad for like half the teams. The other half of the teams, I mean, you're playing to win an NBA championship, and your job, I mean, that's the main goal for your profession, your in real life profession that you're doing, and you're making money for a living. So is it really that bad? I think just for a playoffs, it would be okay, in my opinion. But we'll see. I mean, maybe the Chris Paul or leaders of the Player Association have differing opinions. I think it would be a solid compromise. And then to the powering through point, the NFL, it's obviously you can't really compare that because you're right, Pranav. They only play a game a week and there's 17-week schedule. But the MLB, I mean, there was a 60-game schedule and they powered through. And honestly, it looked rough in the beginning for the MLB. I mean, it was pretty bad. And they ended up, I don't even think they delayed the season once, and they got through it, and they did the playoffs successfully. So it's definitely possible. It could be different for the NBA. We'll see. I agree, 21-ish cases, then you're kind of getting pretty iffy. And there's also just no guarantee. Like, even if you do delay the season for 2 weeks, I mean, we could still see more postponements come right after that. So it's just like powering through, delaying, it just – ultimately, just you got to get to the end goal for the NBA. Just get to the end goal and then go from there.
So our final topic of the day is, will the Brooklyn Nets Big Three result in a championship? It's a loaded question because we don't know how many years are going to last or all of that. So I'm going to start off with Thomas on this one. Will or will they not win a championship, and why?
My gut is telling me yes. It's not going to be this year. It's not going to be this year, but I think they will. I really do think they can get it done. The reason why, I mean, the reasons why are pretty self-explanatory. I don't think anyone can sit here and deny the Nets' upside. When you have 3 of the best creators this game has ever seen, 3 of the best scorers this game has ever seen, that's going to happen. The upside here is tremendous. I mean, if the role players really buy in and they do a good job surrounding Durant, Harden, and Irving, if the defense is better than everyone if everyone expects, then this team is loaded. This is the best offensively gifted trio in NBA history, in my opinion. Right. Looking at their individual talents, and so the upside here is tremendous, and I'm willing to bank on it a little bit here. There's obviously some risk. Kyrie Irving is a wild card. We don't know, if he's going to be on the court. But I really think that if all of these guys can buy into playing off the ball, playing with 3 different stars, like those guys are all going to be playing with one another. They're all going to have to, share the ball, which I said, I think will be fine. I think they can do it. I really do think they can do it, provided they have a productive free agency next year, and they get the right pieces. Hopefully they trade for someone like Holmes. I think he'd be great for them. But I really do think they can do it. I think you're betting on a little bit of a gamble. But if my gut's telling me that they will win a championship with this core.
Will.
Yeah, I mean it's a loaded question, but I can argue really for both sides. I agree, Thomas, with what you're saying that I don't think that they're going to win it this year. I think there are too many factors, both internally for them and externally. And historically, like you look at big threes of this magnitude, the Miami Heat, they didn't win in their first year. The Los Angeles Clippers weren't obviously a big three, but they were the favorites last year, and they didn't win last year. So it's like we've seen teams when star players join forces together, it usually, sometimes more than not, the first time around, it doesn't really work out. And then the second or third time, they finally get it done. And I think given the fact that I still would pick the Lakers over the Nets. And that, to be quite frank, that would be the only team that I would take over the Brooklyn Nets, assuming that they figure out the chemistry and the fit by the end of the season. But I am going to make that assumption. The only team I would take of them is the Los Angeles Lakers. And it's really just because I think their depth is far better. I think their coaching is better. I think Steve Nash is a brilliant mind, but Frank Vogel is wildly more experienced, and he's led his team to the championship last year. He just has so much more experience than Steve Nash as an NBA coach. I think Steve Nash probably has a better pure basketball mind, because obviously he was such a all-time great player, but I think just for coaching experience-wise, Frank Vogel is better, so I give him a coaching advantage. I give him a depth advantage. I would say their top two is better. I would say overall, Kyrie, Harden, and KD, that star power is better than LeBron and Anthony Davis, just because 3 is better than 2. But I would take LeBron over Kevin Durant. I would take Anthony Davis slightly probably over James Harden. And then obviously Kyrie's kind of the difference maker. And then I think the Lakers they have so much more continuity in the fact that they're playing with their full team right now. LeBron and Anthony Davis, they fit perfectly as a duo. And we still haven't seen how this trio fits with the Nets. So I would give the Lakers the advantage. So I just think 2020 is not going to be the year for the Nets. But 2021, you're right. Like if they can, especially they didn't give up Dinwiddie, which maybe they didn't give up if Dinwiddie didn't get hurt, they might not have had to they might have had to include him in the deal, but that could low-key be a blessing in disguise, because they could have Dinwiddie, coming off a pretty major injury, but they could have him coming into next year, which is great, because that really helps your depth if Dinwiddie could come back for the next season, or even he's out for the year, right? He's not going to come back for the playoffs.
No.
Okay, so now he could be all right. So he comes back next year. That's huge. That guy is capable of putting up 20 points a night. He did it last year. Obviously, he wouldn't do that again, but he's capable of doing that, something like that. So I think the Nets, with a healthy Dinwiddie, figuring out obviously their chemistry and their fit. They have weaknesses. Their team defense. My biggest point of concern for them would be obviously I believe the last 20 years we have never seen a team that's been bottom half in the league when it comes to team defense win the NBA championship. I don't know if that's ever happened in the last 2 decades. The Brooklyn Nets would probably have to defy those odds, because I don't think that they're going to be a top half defensive team, at least currently constructed. So they would have to defy the odds when it comes to that. But I think that they could do it. I just don't think it's going to be this year. I think 2021 is a lot better of a bet.
I also think that in a playoff series, I think the Lakers have the 2 best players in that series. Probably in a popular.
I agree.
Maybe, yeah. Current Anthony Davis could be better than current Kevin Durant.
AD is only getting better.
Especially, yeah. Anthony, in my opinion, Anthony Davis is the best defensive player in the league.
He's one of the best players. It's a small sample size, but he's one of the best playoff performers of all time.
And people said the stats, but it's just look at he was going against the Golden State Warriors. Who cares?
Yeah.
Of course, he's not going to win more than one game.
The thing is, he won a game against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, that's true.
No one else did.
And he swept the Dame Lillard Blazers. And it's not like Dame wasn't a great Dame. And I know Drew Holiday was the guy who locked him down.
That Blazers team, the Blazers team they played this year had a 28th ranked.
Yeah.
Last season they had a 28th ranked defense. The one he faced had a number 6 ranked.
Yeah, that Blazers team was a top 3 team in the West.
Blazers team.
Yeah, that was a top 3 team in the West. Dame was just as good of a player as he was the following year. Obviously, but the reason he didn't show it is because Drew Holiday is just that good of a perimeter defender, and Anthony Davis absolutely feasted on Nurkic, who isn't a terrible defender. He wasn't that bad of a defender at that point.
Yeah, he dropped 48 points in one game, I
Yeah,
believe. But in terms of the Brooklyn Nets, I put out a tweet the other day which said they're going to lose multiple championships to the Lakers, and I think I might have been wrong already. So I'm going to say a hesitant yes. The Brooklyn Nets will win a championship, at least one in their time together, and next year is their best chance. When Kyrie and KD signed, I said the 2021-22 season is their best opportunity. I thought this was going to be a season where they gel together, they figure everything out. With KD coming back from an Achilles injury, this is the year where they just test the waters. And then 2021 and 2022, it's the year they go for it all. And there's two major signings they can make. So the Brooklyn Nets are in cap hell right now. They have to trade out of the Jordan contract.
I believe they're over the cap, like already with their top 3 players.
Right. So Thomas,
which is insane.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but Andre Roberson's a free agent now, right?
Yep. Thunder didn't resign him.
Sign that man for a vet minimum. Sign Andre Roberson.
That would be a great signing.
He sucks offensively.
Who cares? But they have enough offense.
He's one of the best.
He was shooting well in the bubble too. So I don't buy the shooting, but I'm just saying.
When he's healthy, he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA.
Yeah.
And Kevin Durant has to beg, and James Harden to an extent, they both have to beg their former teammate in Oklahoma City, not Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, to opt out to use his player option to opt out of his Clippers contract and sign with the he's only signed with the Clippers for $9 million right now. They have to plead and beg that he opts out and signs for about $4 million less with the Nets. Hopefully that works. That's a title team. I don't care about
with Serge Ibaka.
Serge Ibaka and Roberson added to that defense.
Yeah, that fixed.
They're not beating them because they're not going to retrain. They're not going to retain Montrez. I mean, I think they have the Trez sucks. Trez sucks defensively. Marcus Gasol has been. They thought he was going to be a Dwight Howard replacement. He hasn't been that great. I mean, Dennis Schroeder has been huge, but I mean, I would rather have the Ibaka Roberson defensive upgrade than just Schroeder himself. And Schroeder wants to get paid. They offered him an extension. Schroeder said no, he wants more money. So the Lakers are not in a great cap situation either. LeBron's only getting older. Obviously, the greatness of LeBron James, we know how well his longevity will extend. But the Nets are not – it's not impossible for the Nets to narrow this margin. I mean, they're a couple players away defensively.
Yeah.
Becoming a champion
and I mean,
favorite.
Yeah, and so getting like a Dinwiddie back next offseason, possibly doing a couple of those moves that you mentioned. I mean, they have a few tradable contracts and some second-round picks that they could attach, so you could get better defensively. So again, 2021, or really, I guess 2022 would be the year that they could possibly win the championship. I think that's the year. I think they will probably face the Lakers, assuming they figure it out. But I would probably take the Lakers currently constructed because I just think they're the better overall team right now. And they just have the better top 2, as we said. And then overall, when it comes to the Nets, I keep mentioning, their fit and their chemistry. To me, that's really their biggest question mark. It's not even the fact that it's team defense or depth. It's can all 3 of these guys accept possible new roles and sacrifice just a little bit for really the greater good, for the team good. Because historically, one player in a big 3 like this, Chris Bosh, Kevin Love, they've had, and I know those guys are big men, but still, historically, usually the lesser of the big 3 has to sacrifice. In this case, I think that would be Kyrie Irving. That's kind of a big ask, but I think when it comes to who could sacrifice, and Kevin Durant's going to have to play even more off ball maybe than he did and have to even in Golden State. Like he was playing a lot of off ball in Golden State. I think he might even have to play more with Brooklyn, just considering how ball dominant Kyrie and James Harden are. I think Harden's going to have to utilize that play. You mentioned earlier in the show, Pranav, Harden's playmaking ability. I think he might have to utilize that even more just because Kyrie doesn't really have that, not even close to the level that Harden does. So I think Harden's going to have to utilize his playmaking more than he has been accustomed to, especially when he was with Houston. And then overall, so that's in theory, that's what I think they have to do. in practice, in reality, I have really no idea who's going to be the guy to sacrifice the most in this situation. I don't really know.
You know what they should do? You know what they should do? Next up, like you said, sign Serge Ibaka. All right. Then you trade Kyrie for Russell Westbrook. You sign Kendrick Perkins for the minimum.
That sounds like a team that's going to lose to LeBron James in 5 games right there.
The OKC Thunder squad reunites.
That sounds like they're going to get gentlemen swept by LeBron in the finals.
Carry on. But here's the thing, and the Brooklyn Nets haven't really had great drafts recently. Someone who they should target, I'm not sure Thomas has scouted into him, Derek Culver out of West Virginia. He's a great perimeter defender.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
He's a phenomenal perimeter defender in the NCAA.
Derek Culver's brother?
I'm not really sure about that, but I mean, Derek Culver is a good perimeter defender. He doesn't have to be a good offensive player for this Brooklyn Nets team. They have enough offense. I mean, all he has to do is be a good perimeter defender, and his impact will be felt. All they need to do is add defenders, and I know that's easier said than done, but they're not in an impossible position that many people are accustomed to believing. And there's also a thing called restructuring contracts. I mean, usually stars are willing to take pay cuts to win championships. So.
Yeah, and I think James Harden especially, like, he realizes that this is
right now.
Like, yeah, James Harden, right? James Harden. I mean, it was not even the fact that with the contract, but James Harden, I feel like he might be the most. I know he's the second best player. Like, he's not better than Kevin Durant, but he's better than Kyrie Irving. But I honestly think he might have to sacrifice the most just because of the versatility of his game and the fact that he is in a little bit of desperation mode. He's the only one of those 3 guys who hasn't won a championship. And given at the stage of his career, he knows that really the time is now. And this is really his one last shot, real shot to be a champion in the NBA.
Well, like we said earlier, I mean, I think people are over-exaggerating. Like, obviously, they're going to sacrifice in, like, lineup rotations where they play together. But, I mean, they're going to stagger the minutes, so they don't have to sacrifice as much as they would have initially if they just...
Yeah, I mean, they're probably going to play, in the first quarter and, like, in the closing minutes. But I could honestly see lineups where it's just 2 out of 3 of them playing. And then at times there's just 1 of them, and they can still be fine just because they're also such great scorers.
I haven't scouted Culver obviously, but I know who you're talking about because I watch a lot of my guy Miles Deuce McBride. So yeah, Culver was pretty good.
The reason why I liked Culver a lot is because he clamped Cade Cunningham, and when you clamp Cunningham, that's
impressive.
You have my respect.
Any guy from West Virginia is going to play some defense.
Right.
Miles McBride. That's what he does.
Javon Carter.
Right.
McBride, they're all going to play defense.
Right. But thank you guys for tuning in. This was really fun. I mean, you guys all know what went down. James Harden. The earliest we might see him all play is tomorrow. I mean, there's obviously NFL playoffs going on, but I'll be tuning in to the first quarter of that game.
This is must-watch TV.
That's much. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to watch every Nets game.
Right. And if you use them in 2K, you're a bot. So please don't use them in 2K. But with that being said, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next Friday. You already know the deal. We're out. Peace.
All right.
Is this the dagger?